Thank you very much. Good morning to you all. Given the events that are taking place, especially in the United States, we feel that we should add our revolutionary voice against the unfolding events. And so I'm going to read to you a statement, firstly, on the events that took place in the United States. Zanu PF joins the world over in condemning the callous murder of a black African-American man, George Floyd, at the hands of white United States police. The most chilling and devoid of humanity are the circumstances surrounding the killing of this innocent black man, who pleaded with his murderers to stop choking him because he could not breathe anymore, but they kept on lynching him onto the ground until he passed out. Zanu PF, in solidarity with civil rights movements in the United States, minority groups, and the entire global community, joins the world in demanding for justice on this matter. The murder of Floyd George comes against the backdrop of reports that black African Americans and other minorities in the United States are the hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. The callous murder, which was witnessed by white accomplice police officers, exposes the fact that racism is against black people is embedded and institutionalized in the United States. The brutal and ruthless killing of George Floyd by a white Minneapolis police officer on camera out of no apparent provocation must be an eye-opener that black minorities are at the mercy of successive administrations in the United States. The hypocrisy of the United States as the so-called champion of human rights has been exposed. Indeed, the United States cannot prefect the world on human rights in light of this latest incident, which has, among many others, left them deprived of the moral high ground to speak or police the world on human rights and democracy. The murder of this black African American comes amidst global calls for the United States to close its torture camps in Guantanamo Bay, where several blacks and Muslim communities have been condemned to, following largely frivolous accusations of being terrorists. Indeed, as we offer our solidarity to the black communities in the United States, whose lives continue to be at risk due to racial discrimination at the hands of authorities, we remember George Floyd's last words in pain, that, and I quote, "I can't breathe, I'm choking," end of quote. These words must become symbols of resistance for the peoples in Cuba, Palestine, Venezuela, Iran, Sudan, and Zimbabwe, whose lives and developmental aspirations are being choked by the debilitating effects of illegal economic sanctions, which have literally suffocated them such that they can't breathe. The world's doubting Thomases must find this callous murder as a clear indication that indeed the Americans' imposition of sanctions, among many other punitive measures against our country, were never aimed at restoring the observation of the rule of law and human rights, which the United States itself is blatantly and shamelessly perpetrating internally and externally. Sadly, as the world reflects on the horror circumstances surrounding the murder of George Floyd, we are taken aback by the remarks of one Robert O'Brien, the National Security Advisor to President Trump, that Zimbabwe is responsible for the demonstrations rocking every part of the United States, or has contributed to the demonstrations rocking every part of the United States, as people register their anger over the incident. While we offer solidarity by calling for justice and the end to institutionalized racism in the United States, we reiterate the statement made by our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Comrade S.B. Moyo, that such allegations are desperate and without any basis. The police officer who murdered George Floyd is not a Zimbabwean, nor is he employed by our police force. Instead of resorting to blaming us, to the naming and shaming and threatening innocent people of Zimbabwe who are voicing their concern on social media, we advise President Trump to tone down the hostile sound coming out from his trumpet and join our President's call for global peace, respect for humanity, and an end to all forms of racism. We acknowledge the right of Zimbabweans to voice their concerns at whatever level, including social media, with regards to this matter of global concern, as they are taking lessons from the manner in which the U.S. Embassy in Zimbabwe and its troops of sponsored faceless social media accounts, particularly on Twitter, have involved themselves in our internal affairs based on predetermined positions. As Zanu PF, built upon the pillars of unity, peace, and development, we rally the world to condemn this blatant racial killing and the subsequent ruthless and disproportionate crackdown on peaceful protesters, whose only crime thus far is to demand justice. This is not asking for too much, and certainly it can't be the basis for issuing unbridled threats against our country, among others. Zanu PF will always stand up and raise the red flag in defending vulnerable communities the world over, wherever they are, notwithstanding the color or might of the perpetrator. The majority of our black and colored people in America today were not there by choice, but are descendants of a generation that was forcibly displaced from Africa, their motherland in chains under brutal and inhuman conditions during the slave trade against their will. They fought for their emancipation from slavery, and today we remind them that indeed the fight against racism is a just fight, and they must be assured of our solidarity. You of course know your history that they only got the vote in the mid-60s. That is, I think, it's important to reflect upon the pretense of the United States in being a champion of democracy and human rights. However, even as we offer this solidarity, we remind those demonstrating to realize that they can still register their anger peacefully without resorting to violence. We further call upon progressive civil society movements in the United States, as headlined by #Black Lives Matter movement, to equally join the people of Zimbabwe, Cuba, Venezuela, Iran, and Sudan in calling for the removal of illegal sanctions imposed on us by successive U.S. administrations seeking regime change under the cover of human rights and democracy. We call upon President Trump to reflect on the re-engagement calls by our government, led by His Excellency President E.D. Mnangagwa, in order to ensure that our two nations can work together to achieve a better world as equal partners. Sanctions are an act of war, cowardice, and have no place in the 21st century civilization. Indeed, we reiterate that Zimbabwe does not look at the United States as an adversary, rather it is the United States that does so. They treat us as an adversary, notwithstanding, by the way, that we are a small country, a small economy, a small country. We don't have military might to take on the might of the United States, and yet they find it a threatening adversary. Through maintaining hostile illegal sanctions and regime change endeavors, which Zimbabweans have resolutely and resiliently resisted. The murder of George Floyd must be a wake-up call for those in our midst here in Zimbabwe and the region, that we must always stay vigilant in the face of such injustices, which manifest themselves variously by targeting a specific race, the African race. And we must say this, that those of us who go to America and ask for sanctions are not patriotic. They don't love their people. It's evil. That is the end of my first statement. Let me now touch on what I consider has been, over the past weeks maybe, a systematic and targeted attack on the first family members. Systematic, targeted attacks on the first family members. Zanu PF has noted with concern the systematic, well choreographed and sponsored attacks on the integrity of the first family by unscrupulous characters such as Hopewell Chingono, this time targeting the president's son. We are aware that these baseless attacks did not start today, but need to stop forthwith. From false allegations that the First Lady's convoy hit a child in Kwekwe, to that one of his sons that he has interest in Drugs International, all of which have not been backed up by any evidence except publication of pictures involving a Delish Nguwaya. We warn the public and those writing these lies to stop. The president has posed for photos with various business players, both local and international, particularly those donating for COVID-19, as a gesture of appreciation. This cannot therefore translate to owning, knowing, or working with those businesses, either personally or otherwise. We therefore wish to advise false news peddlers and our detractors to desist forthwith from perpetrating desperate character assassinations and shenanigans. We also felt that we should give the party position on the removal of Honorable Energy Mutodi from his office of Deputy Minister of Information, Publicity and Broadcasting Services. We are aware that the removal was some time ago, but we think that we need to issue and demonstrate and show our party position. Zanu PF stands solidly behind the decision taken by His Excellency President Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa on 20th May 2020 to relieve Honorable Energy Mutodi from the position of Deputy Minister of Information, Publicity and Broadcasting Services. And we are taking the opportunity as Zanu PF to reiterate our policy on foreign relations with other countries. Zanu PF's policy is that of non-interference in the internal affairs of other countries. It is on account of this policy that the party resolutely condemns and opposes the imposition, extension, and intensification of sanctions against Zimbabwe, which is a direct interference in the domestic affairs of our country by those countries which have imposed illegal sanctions against Zimbabwe. Worse, in the statements made by Honorable Mutodi, was the fact that the unhelpful negative comments were made by him concerning a fellow SADC member country, a country whose population and political leadership made enormous sacrifices for the liberation of southern African countries, including Zimbabwe. Zanu PF apologizes to Chama Pinduzi, President John Pombe Magufuli, the government and people of the United Republic of Tanzania for the errant behavior of our member and the unwarranted statements that he made. Of equal concern to Zanu PF have been the veiled attacks by Honorable Mutodi on colleague members of the party. The party wishes to make it clear that those it has deployed to work in government and its general membership, we want to make it clear to those who have deployed it in government and our general membership that discipline and teamwork under the leadership of our President, His Excellency E.D. Mnangagwa, is an imperative. Disagreements and contradictions, if any, among colleagues should be resolved through the party's known channels and procedures and not on social media. And I'm sure that you recall that this is the basis upon which we had to discipline former youth leaders, Senengamu and Matutu. We want membership to follow laid down channels and procedures for resolving contradictions and disagreements, and not to seek to do it through social media. And where this happens repeatedly, we will no doubt take the necessary disciplinary action. Zanu PF cadres are reminded that they should never emulate the amoebic and divisive tendencies and characteristics of the splitting opposition groupings. Please, I conclude and ask that you stay home, observe social distance, wear your masks, and be safe. Thank you very much. COVID-19 is real and it kills. Thank you very much for coming to this press conference.
Thank you very much, Comrade Spokesperson. Just a few questions from those whose hearts are burning to ask a question. This is your opportunity. You are welcome. And let's do that as quick as possible. Blessed, the usual one.
Thank you, Mr. Comrade. Correct.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Comrade Chinamasa, you speak well in your statement that there should be resistance to issues where there's oppressive mechanisms. Do you as a PF listen to your own advice? Because in Zimbabwe we have seen attempts to resist, attempts to demonstrate against Zanu PF and its government, its led government, are being quashed ruthlessly by the police.
First, let me say this. There is no oppression in Zimbabwe. So when we say that oppressed people must speak out, let me put it very clearly. There is no oppression in Zimbabwe against which you can demonstrate. What we have are a general economic situation caused by the very people coming or wanting to demonstrate. They go and ask for sanctions, and they don't seem to realize the consequences of imposition of sanctions against our own country. That the country cannot have access to foreign capital, that in fact we are constrained in any way. So when people then suffer, the very people who have asked for sanctions go onto the street and are claiming oppression and all sorts of evils perpetrated by Zanu PF. I want to repeat, there is no oppression in Zimbabwe. There is no oppression. And it's not right for those who have asked for sanctions to be, should we say, goodies, to pretend that they are champions of human rights, when in fact they've asked for the most evil sanctions against their own people. It's not right. It's evil. And you should be telling them that. Unfortunately, you don't tell them that.
My question,
Through the chair, blessed. Yes. Is that a follow-up question?
Yes.
As brief as.
My question was a two-part, but he answered before I finished.
Oh.
Yes. My other question is, you have condemned the systematic attack on the first family.
Yes.
What do you say about Drugs International, its attempt to fleece the government by inflating those prices? Do you condemn
Which is Drugs International? Well, you know, it's not permissible to do unbusiness-like practices. They should be exposed when they appear. I don't know the actual circumstances that you are referring to. I wish I knew. I don't know the actual circumstances that you are referring to. But what I know, currently, there is a problem because of the inflation. There is a problem about pricing and tendering. And I really don't know, if I were a person seeking any services, I don't know what price I would accept. Because today, if I accept $2, tomorrow the cost may be $5. And I don't know in terms of tendering whether those who tender take into account the inflationary increase in prices. I don't know. I will not be specific until I know the specific details. Yeah.
Probably last question.
Okay, thank you, but I had quite a number that I wanted clarity on. The first one is probably have been answered partly, but what I wanted to find out is the crack on protesters in the United States of America by law enforcement agents there. Would you say, as Zanu PF, the force or the crack is justified by the law enforcement agents? And in a...
Of course, it's not justified, but we want to make this very clear. Any looting is not good, and it detracts from the genuine and legitimate cause of the protest. So we obviously don't condone looting. But I want to say this, that it's important not to detract from the legitimate cause of the protest. The protests were legitimate, and they are not just in the United States, they are the world over. Any black person here must feel attacked when you see that gruesome murder. You must feel it's like perpetrated not just against George Floyd, but against all of us if we are black people. Yes. You know, the whole killing, totally devoid of humanity. No different from killing a chicken. And when you have white officers watching, it shows how the extent to which racism against black people is embedded in the United States and institutionalized.
Okay. So I also wanted to say that in a statement that the American official released that classified Zimbabwe as an adversary of the United States, he says that in the United States they allow their citizens to protest, whereas in countries like Zimbabwe they are not allowed to protest. And is it not an indictment on
no. But you should expose the hypocrisy. He says in America they allow and they are killing, cracking down like in your earlier question. Isn't that hypocrisy? Why should you not expose that hypocrisy first of all? They are very hypocritical in what they say. They are, should we say, fork-tongued. They are very selective, even in the people they target. And the fact that they name Zimbabwe as being contributing to the protest, I find that nonsensical. I really do. What, of course, people must know, given our background as a revolutionary people who took up arms to liberate our country, we have that in our blood. We have that in our blood, that we cannot be oppressed without saying so. Even if we don't have the might to challenge the United States, we still have the right to say no. Enough is enough. And they will come and kill us, of course, but we must always, as oppressed people, have the right, enjoy the right to say no, notwithstanding the consequences. Once you deny yourself the right to say no, the right to resist, you are finished as a human being. So that is what I would want to, but for the United States to think that Zimbabwe has the might to cause demonstrations in America, I didn't expect that from a national security advisor. I could expect that from some news media peddling false information, but from a national security advisor to President Trump, to think that we have the power to cause riots, to cause demonstrations, protests in America, is giving us power that we clearly don't have. Sorry to say this, I wish we had that power, but we don't have. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Comrade Spokesperson. Thank you very much, all of those that have come to raise the occasion of this press conference. Keyword, we don't mind the color or the might of the perpetrator. We still retain the right and enjoy the right to say no, injustice must stop. That was the key message from the acting spokesperson of the party, Comrade Patrick Chinamasa. Thank you, Comrade Spokesperson, for gracing this occasion. We are dismissed. Thank you very much.